Hello. Today we're going to go through a lab that we're going to be doing in class. So it's more of a series of 4 activities instead of a lab, but I just wanted to take a chance to demonstrate each of them here before we actually do them in class. So in part 1, we're going to push down on the table with our hand. So we take your hand, you push down on the table. So you feel yourself pushing down, and you can feel that table actually pushing back up. That's that solid contact force that you're feeling. So it says here, when you push down on a table, what do you feel? Well, that table is actually pushing back up on your hand. So if you were sitting on the ground, how does that normal force compare? Because gravity is what's pulling down. Normal force is what pushes you back up and say a chair, or if you're standing on the floor or something like that. Well, that normal force has to be equal. So if you give someone a piggyback ride, there's more mass for gravity to act on pulling down, meaning that the floor or chair or whatever you're doing has to provide more of a normal force to push back up. So what would happen in a normal force if the floor exerts on you if you're holding a huge bundle of helium balloons? Well, yes, the gravity is pulling around on the same amount of mass, but the helium balloons are working to counteract some of that, so the normal force provided is actually a little bit less. Part 2, hold the end of a string with your partner. I'm by myself, so boo. But hold the end of a string with your partner and gently pull. So don't pull this thing apart, but gently pull here. So let's think about this. All right, what force is this? Very good. It's the force of tension. So tension is what's going on in this string, okay? You are pulling one way, well, you could feel that tension coming in that same direction. So tension is always going to go in the direction of the pull. And if you're pulling a wagon of gold bricks or something like that, well, as soon as you like, ooh, man, that's actually a lot heavier than maybe you initially thought it was going to be. There's a lot more mass, a lot more gravity acting on those bricks. So you actually pull that along. You can feel that in your arm. That's a lot of tension there. So it's pulling throughout. So with that, let's consider a chain of rubber bands. So along the line of tension, I got a chain of rubber bands here. So unlike that string where can't really see it, here as you stretch these rubber bands, is only the middle one stretching or the ones on the end stretching at all? Very good. All the rubber bands in the chain stretch. It may appear that that one in the middle is stretching more, but it's because I've got these on the outsides double over, so they've doubled the strength there. But all the rubber bands in the chain stretch. So that tension, what that tells you is that force of tension is equal throughout. You could think of a chain as only being as strong as its weakest link. Well, that weakest link, there's enough tension for it to break, that breaks the whole chain, it breaks the whole rope in half. All right, so part 3 is rub your hands together. What force do you think is causing your hands to warm up? Should be about now. They should be feeling a little warmer. All right, what force is that? Very good. That's the force of friction. So to make your hands get hotter, you could either rub faster or you can push together harder while you rub. Those two things are what really lead to friction. How closely those surfaces are pressed together with how much force and how rough or smooth those surfaces are. Myself, as you guys know, I grew up on a farm, so my hands are kind of rough just already, so I can generate a lot more heat than maybe someone who just uses lotion all the time. I don't know what it is you people do. But what can you do to increase your friction? All right, rub your hand across the table. So now rub, instead of rubbing your hands, rub your hand across the table like that. All right. Does it generate as much heat? Not at all. Why is that? Well, where your hands might be a little rougher rubbing together, right? Your hand across the table is a lot smoother. So because the surface has less bumps are going to push into one another, right? There's less friction, or mu, or coefficient of friction. Because there's a smaller degree going on, or smaller quantity of friction going on, all right, it's going to take a lot longer to warm your hands up if they get warm at all. The last thing I'm going to ask you to do is we're going to demonstrate air drag. So grab a piece of paper, bend it back and forth through the air. What happens? Does the paper go through the air like this each time? Of course not. That trailing edge falls back each time. Well, that's due to air drag, or force of air resistance. So how can we make the paper bend more? We can move faster, right? Or maybe you had a bigger piece of paper, it's going to catch more molecules of air as it moves against it, and sure enough, that's what's going to happen. All right, it's going to bend a lot more. So if you do the same thing with your hand, if you move it real slow, you don't feel much air resistance, do you? If you move it faster, well, sure enough, that's going to feel a lot more air resistance because your hand's bumping into a lot more molecules, just like that. So if it bumps into more, it's going to generate more resistance, or more air resistance, or drag. Now, the thing that friction, we talked about last time, and now this time air drag, what they have in common is they both always work against that direction of motion. So if I'm moving my hand this way, oh, well, I don't feel air on the back side of my hand, right? It's not pushing my hand along, it's pushing against my hand. Same if I push this way, my backhand feels that air, whereas excuse me, the other side of my hand is not feeling it. So air drag and friction always work in the direction opposite to motion. If I slide something across the floor, it eventually comes to a stop because friction is working in that opposite direction. So if we were to drop this thing, though, let's talk about gravity. What force is causing that to happen? Well, gravity, of course. So why is this thing, speaking of air resistance, why does it fall so slow? Well, it falls really slow because this is a bigger piece of paper. It's grabbing more air on its way down. Well, now let's crumple a piece of paper up. Is there as much surface area? Absolutely not. So even though it's the same amount of mass, it's the same size paper, this one is actually going to fall a lot faster as you see it move through the screen. It's because there's less of surface area for air resistance to act upon. So think about this. If you jump out of a plane, if you jump off the upper commons over here, you want as big of a parachute as possible versus a tiny one. The bigger parachute is going to trap more air, and it's going to slow your, I guess, acceleration due to gravity down. You're still going to fall, but you're not going to fall anywhere near as fast. You're still going to land, but you hope it's a soft landing instead of, something like that, right? So just to review, we've talked about forces today. We've done 4 simple little activities just to, I guess, demonstrate forces of tension, forces of gravity, air resistance, or F-air, F of air resistance. We also talked about applied forces. So yeah, I think that might be it. Everything we sort of talked about.